Notre Dame. They said Miami can have the chain. We just want the ring. Well, now Miami has the chain, and they're looking for a ring because Notre Dame, for the most part, is gone. They're done. And the Georgia loss didn't help them either in that regard. It was already going to be near impossible with a 2-loss independent team to get in. Now, even with the Georgia loss, it kind of just shot everything. So, Notre Dame, is Notre Dame still the team that we think they are? They're still a good team.
Yeah, they're still a really good team.
I didn't realize how one-dimensional Notre Dame was.
I saw it so long. I did not think that Notre Dame deserved to be a top 4 team because of how one-dimensional they are. And we're like, oh, but they're really good. I think they're a really good team, but they played 2 really quality teams in Georgia and Miami, and they came out flat against both of them.
You're right.
And so Notre Dame.
Now wait. Notre Dame did play USC. Say what you want about USC. They're not as good as we think they are.
No, they're not.
But they're still a good team.
They're a good team.
So
yes.
you add USC to that crop.
But
you can put them there. So they did well against one of those 3 teams.
I can't put USC on the same level as Georgia and Miami right now. I don't think they're
even now. You don't think you can put USC with Georgia?
I don't think so. I still think Georgia's a really good team. They have just. I don't think Georgia's played anyone either. Until they played a formidable defense this weekend. What formidable defenses have they played this year? Maybe Notre Dame. They played Vanderbilt. That's not a great defense. They played Tennessee. That's definitely not a great defense.
We'll get to that later.
They've played Florida. And that's not a great team. Then they've blown these teams out, and then they finally met a team that's got a great defense and can stop their run and force Jake Fromm to throw the ball. And he couldn't throw it well enough, and he didn't have enough time. Because if you watch that game Saturday, I'm sure Jake Fromm's a great quarterback, and he will develop as a good passer. But when you're given 2 seconds from the snap to make a decision and throw the ball, that's kind of hard. Because Auburn's defensive line was in the backfield all game long, pressuring Fromm, forcing him to run out of the pocket. And so Georgia is still a good team. I think they were just, this weekend they were exposed a little bit. That they rely so much on Sony Michel and Nick Chubb to carry that team that they have not developed their passing game that well. And I think Miami is the better team out of all the teams that Notre Dame's played. And I don't think USC is up there with them, 'cause even though they've got probably one of, if not the greatest quarterback right now quarterback / NFL prospect quarterback in college football, I still don't put them on that same level as Georgia or Miami.
And then on top of that,
I think I just said a lot without saying nothing there, really.
You really did. You make a great politician. I think
a great football coach.
I think the Alabama, Republicans may have a spot open to him, Brooks, that you can slide yourself into.
Man, I'm not a big politics guy. I'd rather, if I'm going to say a lot without saying anything, I can go football. That way I can tell you a whole, our guys are great without telling you, hey, we're not that great.
Well, on top of that, Alabama struggled against Mississippi State. We saw how they had to come back and win that game. Other teams, TCU, for the most part, they need to win the Big 12 championship if they want even a slightest hope at getting into the college football playoffs. We saw Auburn get a big win over Georgia, one of the biggest wins. It is actually, in the college football playoff ranking era, it is the biggest win over a number 1 team. The other 4 losses were single-digit losses. This was 23 points. So, tip your caps to the Auburn Tigers on that one. So, this is going to transition into one team that we're going to talk about that's in the top 6, but not a lot of people want to put them into the top 4. It's Wisconsin. And I've heard a lot of people in our suite talk about it. I listened to Paul Feinbaum and his podcast yesterday talk about it. And the reason why Wisconsin is still kind of just hovering in that no man's land. And I just want to get thoughts, because it's something that we have personally clashed on week in and week out, is Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And we're going to clash again in a couple of minutes when we do the 4 and Out segment. But why is it that you think the committee doesn't give Wisconsin the credit that you think that they deserve?
I mean, you've said it all year, and I've recently more admitted it. Their schedule's not the strongest, but you've got to give them credit for scheduling BYU, even though they're not a good team this year. They scheduled that game.
We played BYU. Give us credit.
Yeah, but you see, the thing about it is you schedule these games years in advance.
It's true.
Right? So they scheduled BYU back
when
BYU was a 10-win team.
You don't know when these teams are going to be good.
So it's not their fault that BYU is one of the worst teams in college football.
The counter argument to that is, well, maybe you should schedule BYU, who usually is up and down. That maybe you should schedule somebody that you know can consistently get to at least 8 wins.
But that's usually BYU's MO. This is one of, if not the worst BYU year I've seen in my lifetime. BYU's always a really good, maybe a 8 to 10 win team, and that's when Wisconsin scheduled them back when it was a 10-win team.
A Power 5 team shouldn't be relying on BYU to put on a resume to say we need to be in the college football playoff. That's all I'm going to say.
But
I understand that BYU is usually an 8 to 10 win team, but if they were counting on the end of this year saying BYU is a quality win, then I don't know what they're thinking.
Just this year, but usually
I know,
it's a quality win.
But
that's not their fault.
Was that their prime out of conference game?
Yeah, that was the big out of conference game because
but then compare that to Clemson, who beat Auburn. Compare that to Alabama, who would have beaten a really good Florida State team if things just didn't fall off the wagon. Compare that to...
But what if... Let's go down the hypothetical road here. What if Clemson had beaten Auburn, but it was the 3-6 Auburn team from 2012? Would we still consider that a big quality win?
That is more of an outlier than BYU.
BYU,
It's easier to say BYU would be bad this year than Auburn would be bad.
I can give you that. But BYU, they scheduled BYU.
And on top of that, Auburn's still a Power 5 team.
Yeah. But
BYU is not.
BYU is essentially, if they joined the Pac-12, they would be a contender in the Pac-12. Normally, they would be a contender in the Pac-12. So there's the first argument for Wisconsin, is they scheduled BYU, which is usually a quality opponent. It's not their fault they're having a historically bad year.
I don't know if BYU would compete in the Pac-12.
I think so.
I think BYU would be decent, but I don't know if they'll compete.
I think they could compete.
And I don't think that's a really good argument to say Wisconsin tried to schedule somebody good outside of their conference, because I've seen better examples. Like Auburn's going to play Washington in a couple of years.
That's next year.
That's next year. That's a good example of scheduling a Power 5 team to play.
But what if Wisconsin next year is a 3-6 Wisconsin team? They turn out to be a 3-6 Wisconsin.
Are we talking about Wisconsin or Washington?
Yeah, Washington. Whoever we're playing next year, Washington. What if they turn out to be that 3-6 Washington team?
You tried and it just didn't work out.
Well, that's what
BYU. But with BYU, it's different. We're taking Washington and BYU and saying, well, both of them are bad. You done messed up.
But Washington is BYU is a more consistent team than Washington, I would argue, because they have been a consistently mediocre team until Chris Peterson has gotten there.
Well, it's a good thing the committee doesn't look at consistency over 20 years. They just look at this year.
But my argument is it's not their fault that BYU is this bad. They went out and tried to schedule a good team. It's not their fault.
It may not be their fault, but they have to live with it.
Yes, they do have to live with that. So, next argument for some people is, you're playing Indiana. You didn't beat Indiana by 20 points. You didn't beat so-and-so by 20 points. Last year, Clemson, I don't remember how many one-score games they were in the ACC.
I mean, I can tell you that Pitt got them.
But the national champions last year were in so many one-score games against teams they didn't have any business being one-score game against. And that is Wisconsin this year. Wisconsin's in these close games. They can't blow anyone out. Last year's national championship didn't blow everybody out. Alabama consistently doesn't blow everybody out. Like that Vanderbilt game this year, where Alabama was an outlier. Usually, they can beat someone by 2 scores, but it's not going to be, oh, you're like destroying this team and this team and this team week after week after week.
And
that was my argument. Is that
those are your only 2 arguments?
People will. That's an argument against Wisconsin. Is they're not blowing people out.
Well,
neither.
I do want to point out. I do want to point out. Let me go through Alabama's schedule: 41-10 over Fresno State, 41-23 over Colorado State, 59-0 Vanderbilt, 66-3 over Ole Miss. You got the A&M game, and then 41-9 over Arkansas, 45-7 against Tennessee. Alabama's blowing people out.
But those are bad teams.
I mean,
those
yes,
are really
but
bad
Alabama, here's the thing that I heard yesterday. Okay, you played bad teams. Well, prove that they're bad teams. Blow them out. And they did that. Like for Wisconsin, if you're going to play bad teams, prove that they are bad teams. Blow them out the water as you should. And they've struggled to do that. If Alabama's going to play a bad team, blow them out the water and make them look like a bad team. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you're going to play a bad team, then punch them in the face. And we saw what happened when you play a bad team enough and people keep punching them in the face. Bush Jones got fired. So there you go.
I like that. That's a good reasoning. But it's still not it's not a, hey, you got to keep them out because of that reason. They're not blowing people out. Because I pulled up Clemson's schedule from last year. The national champion, Clemson, they blew out Kent State the game 1, 56-3. They beat Auburn, who was a mediocre team last year, 14-6. Louisville, they beat them 47-21. They beat Boston College 34-17, 31-17 Virginia Tech, and then you get into this is this year's schedule. Wow.
Good job.
I put in 2016. Here we go. I'm going to put in my crack research.
Good job.
All right. So last year, a mediocre Auburn team, they only beat 19-3.
Wasted 30 seconds of my life I'm not getting back.
They only beat 19-3. They only beat Troy, a Sun Belt team. Troy's good, but they shouldn't be doing this against a
what?
A national champion Clemson team, 30-24. They beat Georgia Tech 26-7. They beat Louisville only 42-36. That's a 1-score game. They beat NC State in overtime, not a ranked NC State team.
Instead of going through the whole schedule, let me point out why Clemson got respect for that. They played teams. They played Louisville. They played.
That's in their conference, though.
That's fine. They played Louisville. They played us. They played Florida State, and they won the ACC championship game. That's 4 quality wins right there. If I go through Wisconsin's schedule, the only quality win that you can actually say is Iowa. And fun fact, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Iowa's going to be unranked when the college football rankings come out tomorrow, and they're a 4-loss team. And that's their quality win. Now, that being said, they do play Michigan this week. But then, it's the same problem. Michigan loses, Michigan gets bumped out the top 25, and Michigan is a 3-loss team. If you're saying your quality wins are against 3 and 4-loss teams, you have a problem, and it's not Wisconsin's fault. But the Big Ten has beat up on each other so much that their quality wins don't mean much. Their one quality win will be the Big Ten championship game. And let me tell you something: it's a heck of a quality statement win winning the Big Ten championship because you beat a pretty good team to get there. But because the Big Ten beat up on itself so much, those wins mean less and less and less as time goes on. It also doesn't help that Wisconsin is in the pretty bad part of the Big Ten. They're on the SEC East equivalent of the Big Ten. That doesn't help us. So, yes, Clemson may have struggled with a couple of teams, but they beat teams they were supposed to beat when it mattered, and they were really good teams. And Wisconsin has beaten teams, and they've beaten decent Big Ten teams. But there aren't the teams that are going to make people's eyes pop and say, wow, this team's for real. They haven't done that yet. And that's not Wisconsin's fault. It's more of this is just how the conference is. This is how it has to be. and you just have to weather the storm. And in the next coming years, you need to schedule better out-of-conference opponents. So if your conference does fluster like it is this year, you have those quality wins against Power 5 out-of-conference foes to back up. Well, look, our conference may suck, but hey, we beat USC.